So really the main thing that I need to figure out at this point is how tall this kiln is going to be. I have read that you need, and I'll provide a link to where I have gotten this information from, but I have read that you need about 1 square foot of solar panel for every 10 board feet that you have in the kiln. And the problem that I'm having right now is the fact that my kiln is much wider and larger than most of the kilns that you find on the internet. And the problem that I have is that front wall is going to determine the height of the rear wall. So once you factor in the front wall and add that 45-degree angle and the length, that 10-foot length going back, you end up with a 6-foot addition to your wall. So if I make it 6 foot on that front wall, it's going to end up being a 12-foot rear wall, and that's just too much to deal with. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to measure this this stack and see exactly how big this main stack of lumber that I have is, and then just try to go by those dimensions. So let's see if we can put a tape measure on this and see what we've got, because I think that may make our lives a little easier here. So if you take this stack of lumber and you measure it from the very bottom board, not the sticker, but the very bottom board to the top, it comes out to be right at 2 feet, so 24 inches. And to that we'll add 6 inches to account for the permanent 2x6 it's going to be on the bottom to get these boards off of the floor in the kiln. So that's 2.5 feet, and I think I'll probably want to add a little bit more to that in order to have some airspace on the top for that airflow. So in other words, that sounds like about 3 feet or so. So you got 2 feet there. We'll add 6 inches to that, which makes it right there. And if you add 6 inches to if you add a 6-inch space on the top for air to flow through, that's that much right there for dead space on the top, for air space on the top for it to flow. That's probably sufficient, and that'll give us after you factor in that 45-degree angle, that will give us a 9-foot rear wall, which I don't think will be too terribly unwieldy to deal with. So and that stack right there is about 680 board feet. If you consider the 2 foot, if you consider the amount of boards that are in it, and the the length of those boards, the thickness and width and all that stuff. So I'm thinking 3 feet will probably be sufficient, because with this kiln you've got to consider something that you have to consider is this kiln is really big, and whatever you calculate one stack to be as far as board feet, you have to double it, and that'll give you the capacity of this kiln, because I designed this kiln so that you could put 2 stacks of 8-foot lumber in it. So one stack can go on this end, another stack can go on that end, and you'll have 4 feet total left over. And I think probably I'll have doors right along in this area to help with loading the kiln and make it a little easier to load. So anyway, long story short, this wall I think is going to be about 3 feet. This rear wall, that will make that rear wall 9 feet. And let's just get started and see what happens. There may be some trial and error, but that's how we learn. Alright, so I've made this kiln a little bit too big. It's 10 by 20. Most of the designs that I have seen, or the main design, and I'll put a link in the description, that I have seen is only about 4 feet or so wide. The problem with this kiln, if I were to use the entire 10 feet, the back wall would be unbelievably tall and the capacity would be way more than I really need. So here's what I'm going to do. So imagine how the kiln works. You've got the fans in the back on the top that draw in fresh air from a 10-inch dead space behind them with vents on the top of the back wall of the kiln. They draw in that air and then they push the warm air that's been heated by that solar panel. They push that air down towards the front of the kiln, towards the front of the stack, and then through the stack. And all that warm, moist air vents out the back with the moisture from the wood, and that's how it dries. So all I really need in front of this stack is 10 inches. So I don't know if you can see, I've got a stick right there at 10 inches. And then behind that, all I really need is about 4 feet. So 4 feet, excuse me, the 4 foot mark is right here. Now behind that, I need about 10 inches, probably less really, but I'm just going to assume that it's 10 for now. I need about 10 inches for the fan. And then behind that, I need a 10-inch area for dead space between the fans and the back wall. So that ends up giving me over 5 feet of overlap, not overlap. That gives me 5 feet of space behind this kiln. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that space for lumber storage or something like that. Maybe I can put a rocking chair on it and me and my wife can sit back here and use it as a back porch. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'll put some tin over it and we'll just do that because this kiln is too big, quite honestly. So we're just going to use the whole thing. We're not going to tear up anything. We're going to use the whole area that I've already got, and we're just going to go from there and improvise as I go. So I think it'll be pretty cool. It's going to be a kiln back porch setup or lumber storage setup, a covered area on the back to keep lumber dry, and maybe I'll put a back door in the back of it just so I can have some more access. But anyhow, we'll just see what happens. I wanted to give y'all a closer look of what I'm doing here. Like I said, some of you math gurus are probably going to laugh at me, but this is the only way I know to do this. I've got to have these 2x4s, these studs, all the way up to the very top, to the back of the solar panel on the kiln, to the back wall. And honestly, I don't have any idea how to get all of those measurements between the front of the kiln and the back of the kiln. So I just stuck a, what is this, a 1x2.5, 1x3, I'm not really sure. I just clamped it down on this very front angled piece right here on the top of the front wall and ran it all the way up to this board for support, and checked this angle right here to make sure it was a 45-degree angle, and it's pretty well dead on. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure what I need from the bottom of the kiln to the bottom of this right here, and that'll give me my measurements. So in other words, instead of having to do all kinds of high-powered math that I don't understand, I'm just going to measure like this and I should be okay. So my piece right here from the long end would be about 10 inches, and I'm just going to go up from there. And what I'm probably going to do is when I cut these, I'm going to make doubles of everything, because this side is going to be identical to the other side, and that way I won't have to do it all over again when I get over there.